The first time my contract mark burned, it wasn't because I misbehaved. It was because I insulted my brand new alpha on live television. Which, to be fair, was technically both misbehavior and a personal hobby. The press hall of KINN Dynamics glittered like a jewelry box, glass walls, a glowing stage, corporate banners, shimmering in cold blue light. Rows of cameras faced me like a firing squad, ready to broadcast my face, my voice, and unfortunately, my questionable survival instincts to the entire country. I stood center stage in a pale tailored suit that probably made me look richer, calmer, and significantly less terrified than I actually was. The knot in my stomach had its own pulse. My hands were steady, but only because I'd practiced this persona for years. Behind me a screen flashed. Kris Lee, Contract Omega Premium, a title that sounded like it belonged on an expensive snack. And to my left stood him, Martel KINN, the new CEO, the heir of a family empire, an alpha who looked like he'd been carved out of quiet storms and expensive decisions. Tall dark hair slicked back just enough to show the sharp lines of his face, suit so perfectly fitted, it made everyone else's look like discount knockoffs. His posture was straight, hands relaxed at his sides, expression almost gentle, if you didn't notice the coiled power underneath, a predator pretending not to hunt. The host finished some forgettable speech and gestured to me with a too bright smile. "Kris, do you have anything you'd like to say to the public?" I did. Unfortunately, my brain and my mouth were not on speaking terms. So instead of something diplomatic, I turned to Martel, gave him my best, harmless Omega smile, and said into every microphone in the room, "Don't worry, Mr. KINN. If you're half as emotionally constipated at home as you look at work, I'll keep my expectations low." A few journalists choked. One cameraman gasped dramatically. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, did he just..." The contract mark on my right wrist suddenly flared hot, like someone had pressed a heated coin against my skin. I sucked in a breath through my teeth. Oh hell. He's stronger than they said he'd be. Martel didn't snap, didn't glare, didn't react like any alpha I'd known before. He smiled. Slowly. Like someone who'd been waiting for me to do exactly this. "If that's your opening statement," he murmured, just loud enough for the nearest cameras to catch it, "I'm looking forward to the rest of this contract." The hall erupted, flashes, chatter, the kind of excited chaos that meant tomorrow's headlines were already writing themselves. My mark burned again, a second pulse of heat under the skin. I straightened my shoulders and kept talking anyway, because if there was one thing I did well, it was pretending I wasn't afraid. "So you can look forward to something," I teased. "Good to know you're not fully made of granite. And here I thought your reputation for biting was exaggerated," he replied smoothly. I blinked. He just parried me. Effortlessly. The cameras loved it. People laughed. Someone yelled iconic, which was flattering, though my wrist continued sizzling like a vengeful stove. We did the usual handshake and signature routine, his grip cool and steady, mine maybe a touch too firm, because if I was going down, I was going down dramatically. The contract seal glowed gold as it synced to us both. A tightness curled in my chest. Temporary. Legal. Safe. That's what a contract Omega was supposed to be. So why did his touch make my heartbeat stumble? The moment we stepped off stage, the noise vanished behind heavy soundproof doors. A long polished corridor stretched ahead, quiet and dimmer. Just us and the hum of hidden air vents. I exhaled, rubbing the edge of my wrist. "You know, I started. Most alphas at least pretend to be offended when I insult them." Martel walked beside me without looking over. "Most alphas lack imagination." "Ah. And you don't?" He finally turned his head, gaze sliding over me slowly. "Not objectifying. Evaluating. Not when it comes to you." My step faltered. Heat rushed up my neck. The mark pulsed, reacting to his attention. Martel stopped walking. "Kris." His voice dropped, low even, almost gentle. "I don't break my contracts." I opened my mouth for a snarky comment, but he leaned in slightly, just enough that only I could hear the next line. "And I don't break what's mine." My breath froze. Not because of dominance, not because of fear, but because his tone carried something else, something quiet and dangerous and horribly intriguing. Possession without cruelty. Control without force. A thinking alpha. The worst kind. He straightened again, expression returning to composed neutrality. "We have a meeting in 10 minutes, he said. "Laura will take you to my floor. Try not to terrify her." I don't terrify people, I muttered. You do, he said simply. Beautifully. The contract mark throbbed again, hot, electric, alive. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd just entered into a contract I wasn't ready to survive. The lobby of KINN Dynamics looked less like an office building and more like a shrine built to worship ambition. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, towering glass panels reflecting sharp silhouettes of passing alphas, enormous digital displays showcasing quarterly triumphs and visionary slogans. Everywhere I turned, someone in an immaculate suit walked with the confidence of a person who believed failure only happened to other people. I took a slow breath. If the press hall felt like a stage, this place felt like a battlefield. Laura, Martel's secretary, led me through the entrance with the stiff posture of someone escorting a wild animal wearing a human mask. She was petite, crisp in a charcoal gray skirt suit, and radiated the emotional warmth of a malfunctioning vending machine. If you could avoid commenting on Mr. Kinn's staff, she said tightly, we would all appreciate it. I don't comment, I replied lightly. I observe. And I share my observations. With style. Her mouth flattened into a line so sharp I almost heard the paper cut. We stepped into an elevator that whisked upward with unnatural smoothness. At floor 70 the doors opened to a corridor that was nothing like the chaotic brilliance of the lobby. Martel's floor was quiet. Minimalist. Each surface clean and purposeful. Neutral colors, expensive materials, lighting arranged so no shadow dared fall out of place. The air itself seemed disciplined. Laura gestured to a glass-walled corner office. Mr. Kinn is waiting. Inside, Martel stood by the window, hands in his pockets, posture unreadable. The view behind him stretched across the entire city. Cold skies, busy roads, the pulse of a metropolis where weakness didn't survive long. He didn't turn when I entered. Just spoke. Do you like the building? His voice flowed through the room like warm whiskey. It's impressive, I said, and a little intimidating. Like dating someone who alphabetizes their spice cabinet. A pause. Then, surprisingly, a hint of a laugh. Laura, give him the schedule, he said. She handed me a sleek digital tablet with a color-coded agenda that looked like it belonged to a presidential candidate. This is a lot, I murmured. You'll manage, Martel said simply. Laura opened her mouth, probably to warn him I was more trouble than benefit, but he glanced at her, and she instantly closed it. Then he finally turned toward me. You fight too beautifully, he said. For someone who claims he doesn't care. My breath hitched. Not because of the compliment. Because of the way he said it, like he'd been studying me long before we met. I recovered quickly. And you're observant for someone who pretends he doesn't notice. His expression flickered. Something like amusement, interest, maybe even intrigue. A dangerous combination. Laura will show you the analyst wing, he said. Tyron will assist you with initial orientation. Laura nodded sharply, and guided me through a series of corridors. As we turned the corner, the atmosphere changed again. The noise level rose. Conversations clipped and fast. Screens everywhere. Stacks of documents. Analysts pacing with the urgency of people trying to outrun time itself. The analyst wing was an anthill, if ants wore suits and suffered from chronic perfectionism. Tyron, Laura called. A young man nearly jumped out of his chair. He was pale, slightly round-shouldered, glasses slipping down his nose, tie crooked. When he saw me, he turned bright pink. Hi, he stammered. You're Kris. Last time I checked, I said with a soft smile. He squeaked. Actually squeaked. Laura handed him a tablet. Help Kris access the archives. Oh, yes. Of course. I'll just give me a second. He fumbled with his ID card, the lanyard tangling. I gently rescued it, detangling the loop with a practiced flick. You're a lifesaver, he whispered. You'd be surprised, I muttered. Laura excused herself to go manage something critical, which probably meant telling someone how I was already ruining her day. Tyron spent the next 10 minutes explaining building navigation, how analyst permissions worked, and which areas were off limits. His voice quivered the whole time, though I wasn't sure if it was because of nerves, or because his undeniable crush was short-circuiting his brain. Eventually he left to fetch a printed schedule, leaving his temporary pass sitting innocently on the table. I stared at it, then at the door, then back at the pass. Look, in my defense, old habits die hard, and I had work to do. I slid the pass into my pocket and casually strolled toward the corridor leading deeper into the restricted zones. No cameras, just badge-locked doors. My heart started pounding. My pulse rushed in my ears. I reached the archive entrance, held up Tyron's badge, and the moment the lock clicked open, my contract mark ignited. A searing burst of heat shot across my wrist, up my arm, straight to the base of my throat. I staggered back. What the hell? My wrist throbbed like it was glowing from the inside. Martel had noticed. Somehow. From floors away. From behind glass walls and layers of people. The mark reacted because he reacted. Panic flickered in my chest. Not because I feared punishment, but because a horrifying thought slid through my mind. Why do I not want him to find me for the wrong reasons? Footsteps echoed behind me. Fast. Determined. Not Tyron. Not Laura. My mark burned again. And a voice I already recognized far too well said, "Kris." I froze. For a second, neither of us moved. The archive corridor was dimmer than the rest of the floor, the motion activated. Lights flickering to full brightness as if they too held their breath. My contract mark pulsed, hot and insistent, sinking to the steps that approached behind me. I knew it was him before he spoke. My body knew before my brain caught up. "Kris." Martel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I turned slowly, rehearsing several charming lies, 2 believable excuses and 1 emergency fainting spell. But when my eyes met his, every plan shattered. He stood only a few feet away, too close, uncomfortably close, the kind of close that made denial impossible. The overhead lights caught the edges of his dark hair and the sharp line of his jaw. His expression wasn't angry, or shocked, or disappointed. He looked attentive, and somehow, that was worse. "I was exploring," I said, keeping my tone breezy. "Your building is very large, easy to get lost, confusing layout, poor signage." "Kris." Just my name, but with that calm, weighted note that wrapped around my ribs like a hand. My pulse stuttered. His eyes flicked to my wrist, where the contract mark still glowed faintly. I curled my fingers instinctively, but he'd already seen. "Come with me," he said. It wasn't a command. Not exactly. But it felt like one. His personal office sat at the far end of the floor, a spacious corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city like a god surveying his territory. Dark wood, soft leather, the faint scent of black coffee. The room radiated authority without trying. Martel closed the door behind us. I stayed near it. He didn't tell me to move. He didn't reach for me. He simply walked to his desk and set both hands on the edge, watching me with a quiet intensity that made my skin feel too tight. "Is there something in the archives you need?" he asked. Straightforward. Even. Utterly neutral. Which made it infinitely worse. "Define need," I said with a shrug. "I'm more of a curiosity-driven creature. Exploration builds character." "You weren't exploring." "Maybe a little." "Try again." I stiffened. "You don't get to interrogate me." His gaze didn't waver. If anything, it softened into something even more dangerous. "I'm not interrogating you. Really. Because it feels very interrogate-y." He merely tilted his head. "Then why are you so defensive?" My throat tightened. Martel walked around the desk, not hurried, not looming, just precise, and stopped a mere arm's length from me. Not touching, not cornering, just there. The light from the window caught the silver flecks in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. He lowered his voice. "What were you looking for?" My breath wavered. The truth hovered on my tongue, not the whole truth, but a piece of it, but panic shoved it down. "You store a lot of corporate secrets," I said coolly. "I thought I should familiarize myself with where they keep the bodies." His lips twitched. "You're deflecting." "I'm entertaining." "You're lying." My heart lunged into my ribs. He didn't sound angry. Or accusatory. Just certain. "You're lying," he said again, softer this time. "But not for the reasons I thought." I opened my mouth, because that sentence was a trap and a revelation all at once, and nothing came out. He stepped a fraction closer. Not touching. Just stealing my air. I felt the heat of him like a physical pressure. My chest rose too quickly. Why did it feel like he could see past every mask I'd ever worn? Outside, the city moved, horns honking, engines humming, life continuing. Inside, the world shrank to the space between us. I forced a smirk. Has anyone ever told you that you're unsettlingly observant? Yes, he said. I didn't mean it as a compliment. I know. He held my gaze a second longer, searching, evaluating, peeling back layers with infuriating precision. And then, a loud bang echoed through the hallway. The office door swung open, and 3 security officers rushed in, breathless, radios crackling. Sir, the lead officer said. There's been a data breach. Someone just triggered a siphon on the upper servers. My stomach dropped. Not me. I wasn't even close to those servers. Martel didn't look at me. He didn't accuse. He didn't even frown. But something sharp flickered behind his calm expression. Calculation. When? He asked. Less than 2 minutes ago, the officer replied. We're tracking the source. Martel nodded once. Lock down the affected floors. Notify Edja, and keep him out of the restricted wing until I clear him. Yes, sir. The officers disappeared as fast as they appeared. Silence settled over the room again. A different kind of silence. Slowly, painfully slowly, Martel turned back to me. I braced for accusation, for suspicion, for the cold dismissal I'd seen from so many alphas before. Instead, he asked, Are you hurt? I choked on air. What? No, why would I be? You reacted when the alarm sounded. He paused. Your mark flared again. I looked away. That happens when you're intense. His voice softened. Does it hurt now? A shudder ran through me, annoyingly visible. No, I lied. His eyes narrowed slightly. You need to stop assuming I want to punish you. Heat zipped through my chest at the word punish, humiliating, involuntary. And judging by the faint shift in his expression, he noticed. Before either of us could speak, his communicator buzzed. He checked it quickly, then slipped it away. He stepped back, giving me breathing room. This breach will keep me occupied, he said quietly. But we're not finished. I swallowed hard. With the interrogation? With understanding each other? I hated the way that line unraveled something inside me. As he moved toward the door, he paused and added over his shoulder, Don't disappear again. The mark on my wrist pulsed faintly in response. And I had no idea which of us triggered it. Morning in KINN Dynamics fell quiet in a way that never reached the lobby. Up here, the air was thinner, light spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and pooling on the polished floors like something expensive and fragile. Most of the analysts weren't in yet. Their desks sat in neat rows, monitors dark, chairs pushed in, an entire wing holding its breath before the daily sprint. I walked alone down the corridor, the faint echo of my footsteps following me. My reflection slid along the glass walls, pale suit, carefully styled hair, expression neutral. On the inside, nothing was neutral. My contract mark still hummed with a dull ache from yesterday's near interrogation. Every time I thought about Martel looking at me like he could see past all the practiced lies, my chest tightened. I stopped at one of the windows and pressed my forehead lightly to the cool glass. The city sprawled below, distant and small. You're lying, he'd said. But not for the reasons I thought. He wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. My tablet buzzed in my hand. Automatically I glanced at it, expecting some schedule update from Laura or a nervous message from Tyron. Instead, a notification blinked across the screen. Unknown sender. Private channel. My skin went cold. I opened it. You still owe me. My heart dropped so fast I nearly heard it hit the floor. The corridor blurred for a second. The light seemed too bright, the silence too loud. I swallowed, throat suddenly dry. Another message popped up. Did you really think a forged exit clause would save you, Kris? My fingers started to shake. I tightened my grip on the tablet, knuckles whitening. No name, no signature. Didn't need one. My entire body remembered him before my mind formed the word. Center. My lungs forgot how to work right. I forced in a breath, sharp and shallow. For a moment, I wasn't in KINN Dynamics anymore. I was back there. The mansion had smelled like money and ownership. Old wood and older wine, leather chairs and the faint spice of expensive cologne. Every room was too big, too quiet, as if they'd been designed to echo. The voice of whoever believed they deserved everything they saw. Center was that kind of alpha. Tall, handsome in a cold, generic way, like he'd been assembled from traits people were told they should find attractive. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect smile that never reached his eyes. You're lucky, you know, he'd said the night he renewed my contract without asking. His fingers had curled around my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. Most Omegas would kill to be owned by someone like me. I don't want to be owned, I'd replied, voice flat. He'd laughed quietly, like I'd told a joke. That's not really up to you, is it? The mark on my wrist back then had been a different one. Cold silver, etched with his initials. It hadn't burned often. It hadn't needed to. Control came from isolation, not pain. He'd kept me in his private residence more than in public. I was a status symbol he displayed selectively, like a rare painting. Brought out to impress the right investors, hidden away when not useful. You're mine, he'd whisper in my ear at dinners, at galas, in hallways that never had open doors. You were made to be kept, and every time something inside me had recoiled, clawing at the walls. Eventually, I'd found a way out the only way people like me usually could, through paperwork. A forged legal clause, an altered expiration date, a carefully crafted series of emails that made it look like he'd voluntarily terminated our agreement. It had been risky, reckless, desperate, but it worked. On paper at least. I'd walked away with a new mark, a new name, a new contract agency. Everyone believed the story they were paid to believe. Everyone, apparently, except him. Back in the corridor, my breath fogged the glass. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the tablet. The contract mark on my wrist flared hot, different from before, sharper, like a warning. Someone cleared their throat. I jerked back from the window. Martel stood halfway down the corridor, coffee cup in hand, suit immaculate, tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd been here earlier than everyone else. His gaze flicked from my face to my wrist. The glow of the mark hadn't fully faded yet. He walked over, not fast, not slow, measured, contained, like always. Kris, he said. My voice came out too quickly, too high. Don't you ever sleep? One of us has to run the company. A beat. Are you all right? Yes, I lied instantly. It was a bad lie. His eyes sharpened slightly. Your hand is shaking. I looked down. My fingers trembled around the tablet. I tried to turn it into a casual flourish, but I could smell my own adrenaline. Low blood sugar, I said. Tragic, really. Might faint. You'd have to carry me. People would talk. If that's a threat, he replied dryly, it's not a very effective one. He took a small step closer, not enough to crowd me, but enough that his presence was impossible to ignore. What happened? He asked. His tone wasn't hard. It wasn't the voice of a CEO addressing a liability. It was quiet, steady. Concern threaded through it in a way I didn't know what to do with. For a second the truth clawed at my throat. My past is back. The man who nearly locked my life in his basement just sent me a message through your company's secure channels. And I'm terrified. Instead I smirked. Do you always check on your contract assets personally? I asked. Or am I just special? Yes, he said simply. I blinked. Yes, you always check, or yes, I'm special. Both. My heart did something extremely unhelpful. The mark throbbed again, like it was leaning toward him. Like my body recognized something I refused to name. He watched me another second, then said, if something threatens you while you're under my contract, I need to know. The way he said threatens you made something tighten in my chest. Good to know my resale value is being protected, I said lightly. His jaw flexed, just once. We have a corporate event tonight, he said. I'll send you details, formal. Bring your sharpest words and least self-destructive impulses. I don't have those in stock, I said. You'll have to settle for the usual model. This time, the corner of his mouth actually curved upward. For now, he murmured, and then he walked away, leaving me alone with my buzzing tablet and my spiraling thoughts. When he turned the corner, another message appeared on the screen. See you tonight. Ice slid down my spine. The hotel that hosted the event that evening had the kind of lobby that made you feel underdressed even if you were wrapped in pure gold. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, reflecting in dark marble floors. Soft music floated under the swell of expensive laughter, the clink of glasses, the hum of power doing what it did best, admire itself. I wore a black suit this time, sleek, sharp, intentionally understated. Let the alphas peacock. I knew how to be the most noticeable thing in the room, even when I looked like I didn't want to be noticed at all. Martel arrived ahead of me, of course. He moved through the crowd like gravity had decided he was its favorite. People parted for him. Conversations shifted around him. Eyes followed him. Some with awe, some with fear, some with hungry calculation. His gaze found me across the room. For a moment the noise faded. I felt the mark on my wrist hum in response. Then someone stepped into my line of sight. The scent hit me first. Sharp, familiar, threaded with a particular brand of arrogance my body remembered before my mind did. Kris. His voice slid over my skin like oil. I turned. Center stood there in a tailored suit darker than his intentions, smile immaculate, eyes bright with the pleasure of a hunter who'd finally cornered what he'd been chasing. Up close, he hadn't changed much. Still handsome in that cold, curated way. Still looking at me like I was a belonging he'd misplaced and fully expected to reclaim. He stepped closer, invading my space without hesitation. Too close. Too knowing. My lungs forgot how to cooperate. "Long time," he murmured. "You ran well. I almost enjoyed the chase." Every muscle in my body screamed at me to move, but my feet refused. My mark flared in chaotic pulses, reacting to my fear, to his proximity, to something else. Center's smile widened as he glanced around, taking in the watching eyes, the glittering crowd, the fact that we were at Martel's event in Martel's world. Then, loud enough for the nearby guests, and for the room's predators to hear, he said, "He's still mine." The room seemed to tilt. Dozens of eyes turned toward us. My blood ran cold. And across the hall, I watched Martel's expression change. The music didn't stop. That was the terrifying part. The violins kept drifting through the crystal-lit hall. Glasses still clink. Powerful alphas still murmured in polished voices. The surface of the evening stayed perfectly smooth. But underneath it, something ruptured. Because across the room, Martel saw Center standing too close. Saw the panic in my eyes. Saw the way my mark was glowing like a failing circuit. And something in him snapped, quietly. He didn't storm across the hall. He cut through it. Like a blade. Conversations faltered as he passed. Heads turned. Even the orchestra seemed to waver on a note, as if wondering whether to keep playing. Center turned just as Martel reached us. His smile stayed fixed, but I felt the tension coil through his arm where it brushed mine. Martel didn't spare me a glance. His attention locked on Center with surgical precision. "Mr. Hale," Martel said. His voice was polite, pleasant, and cold enough to crack stone. "You're trespassing on a legal boundary." Center's expression didn't waver, but the air around him shifted, an almost invisible recoil. "Is that so?" he asked lightly. Martel stepped forward, and without touching me he placed himself fully between us. A shield. A barrier. A line drawn by a man who didn't raise his voice because he never needed to. He reached into his inner pocket and produced a sleek hollow slate. A document sprang to life between us, gold-edged, digitally sealed, glowing with official verification. "This is Kris Lee's active contract," Martel said calmly. "Renewed under KINN Dynamics, with full legal transfer of engagement and oversight. All prior contractual claims have been voided." He tilted the projection just enough for Center to see the signatures. Center's face blanched. Not a lot, just the slightest, most deliciously satisfying loss of color, the kind you only saw in men who assumed the world belonged to them. Until someone stronger reminded them it didn't. "That documentation is incorrect," Center said, faltering for the first time I'd ever heard. "My contract was not terminated." "It was," Martel said. "By you. I have the timestamps, the authorization key, and the auditor who signed off." A pause. "Would you like me to display those as well?" Center swallowed. He wasn't used to being opposed. He wasn't used to being challenged. He definitely wasn't used to being outplayed. "You misunderstand," he said, forcing a smile. "I meant no offense." "Oh, you did," Martel replied, still perfectly calm. "And now you're done." Center's gaze flicked toward me, something sharp, something claiming. Martel leaned forward just slightly. "Don't," he murmured. Just that one word. Cold. Precise. Deadly soft. Something in Center's posture cracked. He nodded stiffly, turned on his heel and walked away through the crowd. Faster than dignity preferred. The moment he was gone, my knees nearly buckled. My lungs realized they'd been locked. I dragged in a breath. Too fast, too sharp. Martel turned to me then. Slowly. And for the first time since I'd met him. He looked furious. Not at me. At the situation. At Center. At the fact that he hadn't reached me sooner. "What?" he said, voice low, "was that?" I tried to laugh it off. "An over-enthusiastic ex-client. Happens to everyone." His eyes darkened. "Kris." I swallowed. "Hard. It's complicated. Then, uncomplicate it. I can't. Try. Something inside me flinched. The rush of adrenaline crashed. My hands started shaking again, and I curled them into fists to hide it. It was nothing, I said. He just showed up. Old contract stuff, paperwork misunderstandings, nothing dangerous. It was the worst lie I'd ever told. And Martel saw right through it. Kris, he said with a softness sharper than any threat. Look at me. I didn't want to, because I knew what I'd see. Understanding. Concern. And that quiet focus he used when he was dissecting a problem he refused to let go of. I forced my gaze up anyway. And the moment our eyes met, everything inside me trembled. His expression tightened. You're afraid? No, I breathed. I'm fine. My mark surged, violent heat ripping across my wrist, climbing my arm, exploding behind my ribs. Pain shot through me so hard my vision blanked. Martel stepped forward instantly, reaching but not touching, his voice suddenly sharp with command. Kris. The word tore apart in my throat. I'm okay, I wasn't. The room tilted. Light smeared into gold streaks. The music warped. The crowd dissolved into shadows and echoes. My knees buckled. And before I could hit the floor, a pair of strong arms caught me. Warm, steady, anchoring me against a wall of someone who smelled like dark coffee and control. My last coherent thought was his voice, fierce and low near my ear. I've got you. Then darkness swallowed everything. The mark gave one last blazing pulse, and burned out. Warmth reached me before consciousness did. Not heat, warmth. Gentle, steady, almost protective. Something soft was draped over me, and the couch beneath felt like it had been chosen specifically to trick exhausted people into surrendering. I blinked. Dim golden lamplight filled the room. Smooth wooden panels lined the walls, a deep amber glow reflecting off their polished grain. Soft fabrics, muted colors, textures designed for comfort rather than display. A quiet hum of climate control. The faint scent of coffee and something resinous. Like cedar. Definitely not the hotel. Definitely not my apartment. I shifted, and the blanket slipped lower on my shoulder. That's when I saw him. Martel sat beside the couch, close, but not touching. Jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms, posture leaning forward slightly. His expression wasn't sharp or calculating or commanding. It was tired. Concerned. Focused entirely on me. You're awake, he said quietly. His voice had lost its usual hardness. It sounded like he hadn't spoken since carrying me out of the ballroom. I swallowed. My throat was dry. Did I pass out on you? You collapsed, he corrected gently. Your mark was overloading. It burned out. I blinked. Is that bad? It's dangerous. A flicker of something dark crossed his face. But not irreversible. Before I could ask what that meant, he shifted closer, reaching for my wrist. I instinctively pulled back, and instantly regretted it as the movement sent sparks of pain shooting up my arm. Martel paused. You're still in pain? Only everywhere, I muttered. That earned the faintest curve of his mouth. Let me see it, he said. I hesitated. He waited. Not pressuring. Not demanding. Just giving me space to choose, which somehow made it harder to refuse. Slowly, I extended my right arm. The mark looked wrong, dim fractured lines, the gold fading into a muted, aching red. It felt like a bruise under the skin, pulsing out of sync with my heartbeat. Martel's hand hovered over it, not touching. You might feel heat. Define, might. He gave me a look. I braced myself. Then his fingers brushed the air above my wrist. At first, nothing. Then, warmth. Radiant. Spreading slowly under the skin, threading upward, soothing the jagged edges of my nerves. The pain dulled, then softened further, like someone was smoothing out knots inside me. What are you doing? I whispered. Stabilizing the contract energy, he murmured. Alphas with my profile can redirect their output. That sounds made up. It isn't. That makes it worse. His lips twitched again. Hold still. The warmth deepened, pressing, settling, grounding. I exhaled without meaning to, my body relaxing against the couch in a way that felt terrifyingly natural. For a moment it wasn't an alpha and an omega. It was just a person helping another person breathe. When the glow faded, my wrist looked different. still faintly bruised but steadier. The pulsing pain was gone. Martel lowered his hand. Better? Yeah, I said softly. Actually, yes. Silence stretched between us, not awkward, not tense. Full. Like the air had weight. He watched me with that unreadable expression again, except now I noticed the details I'd missed before. The faint circles under his eyes. The tightness in his shoulders. The way he had positioned himself so he'd be close enough to catch me if I fell again. Why am I here? I finally asked. You were unwell, he replied. I wasn't going to leave you in a public venue surrounded by opportunists. So you brought me to your home? Office residence, he corrected. And yes, bold of you, I said lightly. Bringing your contract Omega to your lair. Something in his eyes softened. You're not an asset I store on a shelf. The room grew warmer. Or maybe that was me. I cleared my throat. About what happened earlier. He waited. Part of me wanted to lie. I always wanted to lie. Lies were safe, flexible, easier to run with. But the warmth in my wrist and the steadiness in his gaze made it difficult to twist the truth into something palatable. So I gave him a piece of the real story. I'm not just a contract Omega, I said quietly. I'm working under an external directive, an investigative one. His jaw didn't tighten. His expression didn't shift. If anything, he just watched me more closely. I suspected, he said. I stared at him. You what? I suspected, he repeated. A little softer. I just waited to see when you'd trust me enough to confirm it. Somehow, that hit harder than anger would have. I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again. You're unnervingly patient. And you're unnervingly reckless. Occupational hazard. He leaned back slightly, studying me. Is center part of your investigation? No, I said quickly. Too quickly. He's just my past. Martel accepted that without pushing. Then let's focus on the present. He stood, walked to a side cabinet, and pulled out a small folder. When he handed it to me, the cover displayed a name I'd seen in internal documents. But not this clearly. Edgar Rothmore. Senior Executive, Internal Strategy. Flagged, suspected unauthorized contract manipulations. My breath caught. You're saying, he's the primary? Martel nodded. He's been leveraging expired Omega contracts to funnel assets off the books. Some of the information leaked yesterday lines up with his access points. I stared at the file. My pulse kicked. You want to take him down? We need to, Martel said. And you need evidence. He held my gaze. We can work together. For a terrifying, exhilarating moment the room felt smaller. Not because he boxed me in, he didn't come any closer, but because choosing to trust him felt like stepping off a cliff. I exhaled slowly. Okay. A flicker, small but real, crossed his face. Relief. Good, he said. Then we start tomorrow. He rose, adjusting his sleeves. You should rest. I'll contact Laura and Martel. He stopped. For reasons I couldn't articulate, not even to myself. I said quietly, thank you. His expression changed again, subtle, restrained, but unmistakably real. You're safe here, he said. At least with me. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed someone when they said that. The technical floor of KINN Dynamics didn't look like the rest of the building. No marble, no glass walls, no tasteful art. Just concrete, exposed wiring, humming machines, and the low, constant thrum of servers working harder than half the executives upstairs. The air was colder here. Sterile. Smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Perfect place for secrets. I walked down the narrow corridor alone, my footsteps muffled on the rubber flooring. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering occasionally, like they were second-guessing their involvement. On the inside I was a tight knot of nerves. On the outside, I was calm. Relaxed. Slightly bored. I'd had years of practice. You want to bait sharks? You don't splash like prey. You bleed quiet. I'd made sure the right people overheard the right things this week. An argument with Laura about restrictive access, a staged moment where I accidentally tried to swipe into the server room with the wrong credentials, a few muttered complaints about being wasted as a decorative contract. Word travels quickly when people are looking for weaknesses. Especially people like Edgar Rothmore. I stopped near the server room entrance, leaned casually against the wall, and checked my tablet with a sigh loud enough to echo. Security protocols, I muttered. If only a morally flexible executive with a god complex would offer to help me circumvent them. Tragic. Silence. Then, well, a smooth voice said behind me. Luck is on your side today. I turned slowly. Edges stood at the end of the corridor, hands in his pockets, suit immaculate even in the harsh overhead light. He was tall, sharp-featured, with a face that would have been handsome if his eyes didn't. Looked like he'd sold his conscience for a marginal profit increase sometime last quarter. Mr. Rothmore, I said with a pleasant smile. To what do I owe the displeasure? His mouth curved slightly. You're amusing, Kris. I can see why KINN signed you. Glad my suffering is entertaining. He walked closer, each step measured. Not predatory in a physical way. Predatory in the way people are when they see numbers as more valuable than people. I've noticed you've been frustrated, he said. Trying to access things beyond your clearance. That tends to go poorly here. Oh, I don't know, I said. Some people seem to do quite well breaking rules. His eyes flashed, not with guilt. With recognition. We were done pretending neither of us knew what game this was. I suspect, he said softly. You and I could help each other. Help, I repeated. That's a generous word for what you do. The analysts call it optimization, he said. You're sharp enough to understand that power rarely moves through the official channels. And you, his gaze flicked over me in a way that made my skin crawl, are in a unique position. Decor piece with a security badge? I said lightly. Contract asset with proximity to the top, he corrected. That proximity comes with certain opportunities, restricted archives, private directives, things no one would suspect you of reaching for. He took another step closer. I kept my posture relaxed, even as my pulse spiked. The faint hum in my wrist reminded me I wasn't alone, even if I looked like it. Somewhere nearby, in a blind spot, down a side hallway, behind a secured door, Martel was watching. We both know you're not just here to smile and stand beside KINN at events, Edge murmured. You want information, leverage, a way out perhaps. He was good. Too good. If I did, I said, why would I trust you? Because, he said, voice taking on a sharper edge, I have access to something you care about. He tapped a few commands into his own tablet and swiveled the screen toward me. My heart stopped. My old contract file. Center's name. My forged exit clause. All of it. Sitting in a neat red-flagged folder. If I send this to the wrong people, Edge said quietly, your past becomes public. Your credibility crumbles. KINN loses his pretty asset. And you get dragged back into a legally ambiguous nightmare. Ice spread slowly through my veins. So, here's my offer, he continued. You help me. You use your proximity to KINN to get me into the deeper layers of the archive. The ones even I can't touch without tripping alarms. And in return? I asked, my voice somehow steady. I delete this, he said. No backups, no leverage. You walk away clean when your contract is done. He smiled. We both get what we want. The problem with being good at reading people is that every once in a while you meet someone who believes deeply in their own invincibility. Edge truly thought he held all the strings here. What's in those deeper layers? I asked, playing along. Insurance, he said simply. On KINN, on everyone above me. So that when the time comes, no one can move against me. All that work, I said. Just to stay on top. You say that like it's a small thing. His fingers brushed my arm as he stepped closer again. And if I say no? I asked. His smile vanished. Faster than I expected, he grabbed my wrist and shoved me back against the cold metal wall. Pain flared down my spine. The servers hummed behind the adjacent door, indifferent. My tablet clattered to the floor. Edge leaned in, eyes hard now, voice low and venomous. Then I ruin you, he said. I leak everything. I send your file to Center, to the regulators, to anyone who might want a weapon with your face on it. You become a problem everyone wants to solve permanently. His grip tightened, fingers digging into my wrist just above the mark. I don't need your consent, he hissed. Just your silence. My heart pounded. My breathing quickened. But for the first time facing a threat like this, something was different. I wasn't alone in a mansion. I wasn't locked in a private wing with no exits. I was standing in a corporation where I had leverage, where I had purpose, where I had someone in my corner who could burn hotter than my fear. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid in the same way. My lips curled into a smile. Edge's eyes narrowed. What's funny? You, I said. and there was something new in my voice. Something steel-edged. "You think you're a monster." I met his gaze, held it, and let every shard of my past sharpen my words. "You're not half the monster you think you are," I said quietly. "Trust me. I've met real ones." Anger flashed across his face. His hand slammed harder against my chest, pinning me to the wall. "You arrogant little." "Step away from him." The voice came from the shadows at the end of the hall. Cold, controlled, lethal. Edja froze. Slowly, his head turned. Martel stepped into the light. He wasn't in a suit jacket this time. Just a dark shirt, sleeves rolled, shoulders relaxed. But everything about him radiated authority turned up to a level that made the air crackle. His gaze didn't touch me. It locked onto Edja. "I said," Martel repeated, quieter, more dangerous, "step away." From him. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Edja released me. Too fast. I stumbled, catching myself on the wall. My wrist burned, but the mark pulsed not with panic. This time it felt like it was answering something outside me. Martel walked forward slowly, each step deliberate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't bare his teeth. His fury was the kind that froze, not flared. "Unauthorized physical contact with a contracted employee," he said evenly. "Unauthorized retention of confidential files. Attempted coercion. Conspiracy to access restricted archives." Each charge landed like a blow. "You don't know what you're talking about," Edja snapped. "You don't have Martel tapped his wrist device. A holographic projection burst into the air. A replay of the last 5 minutes. Every word. Every threat. Every touch. My stomach flipped at the sound of my own voice, low and sharp. "You're not half the monster you think you are." "You were saying?" Martel asked softly. The color drained from Edja's face. "You can't use this," he snarled. "It's illegal surveillance." "This is a technical flaw," Martel replied. "Safety recordings are standard. You signed the authorization when you took this position." A new set of footsteps approached. Security officers rounded the corner, expression grim, posture stiff. The lead officer glanced at Martel. "Mr. Kinn?" "Detain him," Martel said. "Full internal investigation. Notify the regulators and legal department. I want every unauthorized transaction traced to its source." The moment the officers touched Edja, his composure cracked fully. "This isn't over," he snapped as they began to drag him away. "You think this makes you safe, Kinn? You think 1 Omega is worth—" Martel didn't respond. He just watched him go with that same cold fury, jaw set, eyes like polished stone. When Edja disappeared around the corner, the hall finally exhaled. I did too. My knees lost their argument with gravity. I slid down the wall a few inches, my legs trembling with the aftermath. With leftover fear, with something else I didn't want to name. Warm fingers closed gently around my shoulder. I looked up. Martel was kneeling in front of me, close enough that I could see the tiny silver flecks in his dark eyes. "You're all right," he said quietly. The words hit harder than any threat Edja had thrown at me. My throat tightened. I nodded, even as tears blurred my vision. Not because I was hurt, not because I was scared, because for the first time in a long time, something terrible had almost happened. And it hadn't. Because someone had stepped in before the damage was done. The first tear slipped free without my permission. I made a frustrated sound. "Fantastic," I muttered, voice thick. "Now I'm leaking." Martel's hand tightened on my shoulder, not possessive, not controlling. Grounding. "You're allowed," he said. That did it. The dam broke. I covered my face with my free hand as quiet shaking sobs clawed their way out. Relief tore through me so violently it felt like grief. My whole body trembled. Through all of it, his hand stayed steady on my shoulder. Not pushing. Not pulling. Just there. "You're safe," he said again, softer. "I've got you." And for once, I didn't argue. Martel's office looked different at dusk. The city outside was fading into indigo, lights flickering on one by one like nervous fireflies. Inside, a single warm lamp lit the room. Soft, golden, gentle in a way the man behind the desk never let himself be. The shadows softened him. Or maybe I was seeing things I hadn't let myself see before. It was my last day under contract. The official one anyway. I packed slowly, too slowly, folding the few belongings I'd accumulated on this floor into a small leather bag. A pen someone had gifted me. A sleek notebook. A spare access badge Laura had angrily insisted I return. I was not returning it. A scarf Martel had handed me on a cold morning without a word. I placed it last, carefully. The mark on my wrist barely pulsed anymore. What once glowed gold now looked like a faded bruise. Quiet, faint, almost gone. Almost free. Almost. Martel stood near the window, tie loosened, hands in his pockets. He'd been watching the city for 10 minutes. Or maybe he was watching me in the reflection. I couldn't tell. I didn't ask. The silence between us wasn't comfortable. It was heavy, full, breathless with everything we hadn't said. Finally he spoke. Is that everything? His voice was calm but too steady, like he was holding himself still with effort. Unless I accidentally stole office property, I said, closing my bag. In which case, we'll pretend I didn't. He didn't smile, but something in his posture shifted. A small, almost invisible exhale. I turned to him with what I hoped was my usual careless smile. So, I said, the contract expires at 7 p.m. Does someone ring a ceremonial bell, release doves, confiscate my tracking privileges? Kris. My name and his voice made something tight in my chest twist sharply. He walked toward me, slow, deliberate, controlled in that way he seemed to default to whenever emotions threatened to leak. He held a folder in his hand. A thin one. He stopped in front of me and held it out. For you, he said. I arched a brow. If this is another NDA, I swear. Open it. I did. And blinked. It's blank. Mostly. I looked up. He was watching me with an expression so open and so careful that for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. There's one clause, he said quietly. The only one that matters. He stepped closer. Close enough that the lamp's glow caught the silver flecks in his eyes, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him through the space between us. Only if you want me. My heart stuttered. The mark on my wrist flickered with a faint, startled glow, like it hadn't realized it was still capable of responding. I swallowed, throat suddenly too tight. You're serious? I asked. Yes. You're giving me a contract with no terms. No rules, he corrected softly. No obligations, no duration, no ownership, no legal ties. I stared at him. That's not a contract, I said. That's the point. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't pretending. He was standing in front of me, offering something terrifying in its simplicity. Choice, not pressure. Not obligation, not leverage. Choice. Painful, dangerous, inconvenient choice. I huffed out a laugh, thin, shaky, too honest. Bold of you, I said lightly. To assume I want an emotionally constipated alpha. Finally, he smiled. A real one. It softened his whole face, curved the edges of his eyes, tugged something deep in my chest in a way that made every wall I'd built feel suddenly flimsy. He didn't look offended. He looked like someone who could wait. Someone who would. I closed the folder and held it against my chest. Silence hovered again. Warmer this time, charged with new meaning. Then, I stepped closer. He didn't move. I lifted my hand. He didn't reach. I hated him a little for that. How he never took what wasn't offered. How he kept giving me space to retreat even when retreating was the last thing I actually wanted. My fingertips brushed his, tentative, then firmer as he curled his fingers around mine. The contact was simple. It felt like gravity. I looked up into his patiently waiting eyes and said, "Then let's make a deal I won't run from." Something in his expression broke, softened, brightened, changed. His hand tightened around mine. "Deal," he murmured. And for the first time, the mark on my wrist glowed not with pain but with something entirely new. Warmth. Promise. Beginning. The tattoo studio was small, warm, and smelled faintly of ink and sandalwood. Soft jazz played through an old speaker in the corner. Nothing about the place matched the chaos of KINN Dynamics, or the sharp glitter of corporate galas. It felt intentional. Calm. Ordinary. A space where choices didn't cost blood. Martel sat beside me on the leather bench, sleeves rolled, wrist bare. The pale skin there looked strange without the glint of a contract mark. Vulnerable, almost. "You sure you want it on the same spot?" I asked, twirling the aftercare brochure like a nervous fan. "Yes. You know that makes us look coordinated." "We are coordinated," he said. I snorted. "You say that like it's romantic." He lifted one brow. "It isn't?" Heat slid up my neck. "I didn't say that." You didn't have to. The tattoo artist, a soft-spoken Omega with lavender hair, cleared their throat politely. So, matching minimalist line work, the phoenix feather, 1 inch? Martel nodded. 1 inch. I glanced at our chosen design again. A feather, simple and clean. Symbol of rebirth, freedom, choosing your own direction. A mark 2 people wore only because they wanted to. The artist turned to me. Left wrist? I hesitated. My old marks, contractual, binding, owned, had always been put on the right. The wrist that burned. The wrist that obeyed. The wrist that remembered. Left felt like something else. Yeah, I said quietly. Left wrist. Martel watched me with a gentleness he rarely showed publicly. If you change your mind, I won't. The machine buzzed softly as the artist began sketching the stencil. I exhaled as the cool paper pressed against my skin. No pain. No heat. Just a weightless outline of something new. Martel went first. Calm, steady, barely flinching. When it was my turn, I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet scratch of the needle. It hurt a little, but in a good way, real, grounding. Nothing like the burn of a contract trying to claim me. 10 minutes later, it was done. 2 feathers. 2 wrists. 2 choices. Looks good on you, I said, nudging Martel's elbow. He looked at mine the same way he'd looked at me that day in the server hall. Focused, steady. Like he was memorizing something that mattered. It suits you, he said. Freedom does. I smiled. Us, I corrected softly. It suits us. Outside the night was quiet, holding its breath. Inside, for the first time, so was I. Because I didn't have to run anymore.